Hello and welcome to Firstpost Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I'm Utsav Parekh and we begin with the headlines. The Houthis claim to have launched a missile attack at Tel Aviv's Ben Gurion airport after Israel hit Yemen's airport and ports with deadly airstrikes. Russia says it's considering possible steps on nuclear testing due to incoming US President Donald Trump's radical position on the issue. Estonia launches a naval operation to protect an undersea power cable in the Baltic Sea. This is after Finland seized a ship on the suspicion that it caused the outage of another power cable connecting the two countries. South Korean lawmakers impeach acting President Han Duck-soo 2 weeks after his predecessor Yoon Suk-yeol was suspended. This has plunged South Korea into a deeper crisis. And India's former Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh, who was also the architect of the country's 1992 economic reforms, dies at the age of 92. Tributes pour in from across the world. We start with Mozambique. The southern African nation has been gripped by violence and unrest. The crisis emerged out of a disputed presidential election and is worsening with each passing day. Fears of a wider regional crisis are now growing. In the latest, Mozambique's army has joined a manhunt to find at least 6,000 prisoners who escaped from a jail in the capital, Maputo. The police had initially suggested that about 1,500 people had escaped, but reports say that the figure is 6,000 escaped prisoners. The prison break took place on Christmas Day. At least 33 people died during clashes with the police and more than a dozen were injured. Around 30 of the prisoners were reportedly convicted terrorists. They were part of an Islamist insurgency in the country's north, which has been ongoing for the past 7 years. Now, eyewitness videos have emerged of the mass prison break. They show large crowds gathering and running about the facility. Shouting could also be heard. Other videos show prisoners snatching weapons from the guards and freeing other detainees. Now, this mass prison break comes as fresh violence broke out in the country. Mozambique's top court validated the disputed October election results. The court's decision put the ruling Frelimo party's candidate, Daniel Chapo, at the winner's spot, with 65% of the votes. This extends Frelimo's 49-year-long reign in Mozambique. Opposition leader Venancio Mondlane's revised vote count is at over 24%, putting him in second place. However, Mondlane has called the vote a fraud and declared himself the true winner of the election. He is currently in self-imposed exile and he's mobilizing mass protests through social media. Earlier in a social media address, Mondlane said he would take oath as Mozambique's next president on January 15th. Over 250 people have been killed in post-poll violence in Mozambique, mostly by security forces who shot many of the protesters. The crisis has brought cities to standstill and has affected the country's mines, ports and borders. Experts fear that the chaos could affect neighboring countries as well. Amid this turmoil, the role of the Southern African Development Community, or the SADC, has come into the spotlight. It's a regional body made of 16 members. Reports suggest that some members of this organization, who are also Mozambique's neighbors, might have a different take on the situation. After Mozambique's constitutional court upheld the disputed poll results, the SADC chair, Zimbabwe's President Emmerson Mnangagwa, issued a statement. He said that the SADC urges both sides in Mozambique to abide by the court's decision. The statement did not explicitly mention the ongoing violence. A statement was also issued by the government of South Africa. It said that Pretoria was concerned with the ongoing violence. It has urged all parties to come to the negotiating table and sort out their differences. South Africa is the foreign nation that has faced the brunt of Mozambique's crisis. South Africa had temporarily shut its main border with Mozambique, causing a massive economic loss. Now, reports say that the South African petrochemical company, Sasol, has been affected. It has reduced natural gas production at its central processing facility in Mozambique. This is to ensure the safety of its staff and assets. South Africa fears an influx of people from Mozambique, especially the criminals who escaped from the Maputo prison. Pretoria is afraid that this could lead to law and order problems in South Africa. Meanwhile, Turkey has cancelled flights to Mozambique. The International Monetary Fund has downgraded the economic outlook for the country. Business disruptions have also raised investor concerns. How can Mozambique and the regional bodies ensure peace in the region? To discuss this further, we have Fredson Guileng. He's a Mozambican political analyst, and he's joining us live from Johannesburg, South Africa. Hi, Mr. Guileng. Welcome to Firstpost.
Thank you very much for having me.
So let's jump straight to the questions then. The number of prisoners who escaped has now gone up. It was initially 1,500, now it's 6,000. How could this affect the situation in Mozambique, in Maputo itself?
Yeah, I think part of it, part of the implication that this might have in Mozambique has been also expressed by the Interior Minister himself when he said that as part of this group is composed of some of very high-level criminals, including rapists, terrorists, and so and so. So this might definitely increase the level of violence in the country. But I must also indicate that there are two narratives about these so-called escapes. Because one points to a deliberate action by the government, by the ruling Frelimo, to try to project a state of anarchy and to delegitimize the political nature of this movement. And the official version is the one that points to the fact that these people are simple prisoners and escapees. So, I mean, no one has been able to verify in concrete what really happened because no investigation has been carried out yet.
Well, while the investigation unfolds in Mozambique, what about the neighboring countries? You're in South Africa. Pretoria is afraid of some of the prisoners making their way down to South Africa. How are they going to deal with this in South Africa?
I think South Africa and the other neighboring country of Mozambique, or possibly the SADC bloc, should have had a long time ago had a much proactive engagement with the Mozambican authorities. Not wait for the conflict to have escalated to this level to now open their doors for dialogue, like the case of South Africa. I think SADC as a bloc, as a regional bloc, has been failing to have a more preemptive action when it comes to conflicts, failing to resolve the root causes of conflicts in the region, other than waiting for them to reach level as such. So obviously South Africa is right to to be scared of a possible increase in criminality in the country, because some of these people might want to jump the border, because if they are, as they've been portrayed to be, escapees, what they will do is to try to run away as far as possible from the Mozambican authorities, and obviously this might result in increase of level of violence, not just in South Africa but in other neighboring countries.
Now, before this, you said that the SADC members, they should have worked together, engaged with the sides, but what we can see is that there are two different angles. South Africa wants the parties to come to the negotiating table. Zimbabwe says that they should accept the court results. Now, if the bloc itself is divided, how can they get together to try and bring diffuse tensions in Mozambique?
The difference in positions clearly reflect the difference in the nature of these two regimes. While in South Africa, we live in a democracy where there's freedom of speech, freedom of movement, and the electoral processes are transparent and they are fair. In Zimbabwe, the situation is not very different from what happens in Mozambique. So it is really not to expect no one would expect President Mnangagwa from ZANU in Zimbabwe to come up with any other statement which would be different from what he said. He was also in power. He has been in power through illegitimate means, through fraudulent elections, and no one could expect anything different from Mnangagwa and the ZANU regime in Zimbabwe. But in South Africa, the situation is completely different. The ANC is a democratic organization. Elections in South Africa are free, fair, and transparent. So that's where the difference is. So now, how do you conciliate these two? It's going to be a little bit complicated because Zimbabwe is the chair of SADC. And what we have to wait is to see which position will prevail in the end.
All right. Well, that shows that there is still disagreement both within and outside in how to deal with Mozambique's situation. Thank you, Mr. Guilhem, for joining us today. We appreciate your input.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Now we shift our focus to West Africa. An accidental bombing by Nigeria's Air Force has led to the deaths of several civilians. Authorities in Nigeria say that at least 10 people were killed and several others were injured. A Nigerian military fighter jet was pursuing terrorists in two villages. This was in the northwestern state of Sokoto. Reports say that the jet mistook some civilians for its targets and conducted airstrikes on them. The strikes were meant for the Lakurawa terror group. They have a base in a forest in Nigeria's Silame district, but the bomb struck two villages instead, Gidanbisa and Runtawa. The villages are on the edge of the forest. The strike killed 10 people, injured others, and destroyed homes and grain silos. Even livestock fell victim to the strikes. Sokoto's state governor, Ahmed Aliyu, shared some images from the incident. They show at least 7 human bodies wrapped in clothes and plastic mats. The images also show charred livestock and scorched mud houses. The Sokoto governor said that the state was collaborating with the relevant authorities to thoroughly investigate the military operation. A spokesperson for the Nigerian Air Force has confirmed the incident. They say an investigation will be conducted to determine the actual number of victims. The spokesperson added that the strikes were conducted based on credible intelligence from multiple sources. They say that they had confirmed aerial surveillance as well. This incident is the latest in a pattern of deadly aerial assaults by the Nigerian military that have killed a number of civilians in recent years. In addition to the incident in Sokoto state earlier this week, in September 2024, an airstrike in the Kaduna state killed at least 24 people. Another incident took place last December. An airstrike hit Tudunbiri village in northern Kaduna. More than 120 people were killed. Reports say that between 2018 and 2023, about 2,600 people have been killed in 248 airstrikes by the Nigerian Air Force. The airstrikes have raised significant concerns among human rights groups. They have called on the Nigerian military to review their procedures. The military, in turn, says that it takes necessary measures to avoid accidents like this. However, the accidents keep recurring. Nigeria has been grappling with a long-running insurgency in its northeast. It is primarily driven by the terror groups Boko Haram and the Islamic State West Africa province. Nigeria has also been struggling with growing security threats in the northwest. The region is prone to attacks by armed gangs and bandits who kidnap people for ransom. In November, Nigeria's military warned of a new insurgent group, Lakurawa, emerging in the northwest. The military said it was posing a threat to Nigeria's national security. The group first emerged in northwest Nigeria in 2018. It was initially not considered a threat. It started off helping locals fight armed gangs and bandits, but soon relations soured. Locals began accusing Lakurawa of stealing their cattle and seeking to impose strict Islamic law. Consequently, the group retreated to Nigeria's border areas near Niger and Mali, but they made some incursions deeper into Nigeria. Following the military coup in Niger in 2023, Lakurawa increased its activities in Nigeria. This is because joint military patrols by Niger and Nigeria along their shared border stopped. The Lakurawa group now operates in Sokoto and Kebbi, the states in northwestern Nigeria. Nigeria has been conducting several ground and air campaigns against Lakurawa in recent weeks. It has also resumed joint patrols with Niger to tackle the threat. But as Nigeria strengthens its fight against insurgency, it has also seen a rise in accidental airstrikes. How long will the people of Nigeria remain collateral damage in the fight against terrorism? Our next story is from South Africa. The country is fighting an underground war against gangs and criminals who control abandoned mines. For weeks now, several illegal miners have been trapped inside a gold mine in the country's northwest. South African authorities have cut off their food and water supplies to force them out and make arrests. But the South African officials now face a grave dilemma. They've received a chilling letter from the miners. It says that amid the food shortage, many of them have turned to cannibalism. Our next report has the details.
South Africa is fighting an underground war. For weeks now, police officers are guarding an abandoned gold mine in the country's northwestern Stilfontein town. They are heavily armed and deployed around every known exit shaft. Their mission: to capture several illegal miners who've been trapped underground. This comes as a part of South Africa's heavy crackdown against criminal gangs who control the country's abandoned mines. The operation is called Operation Vala Umgodi, which means closing the holes to arrest illegal miners. The aim is to force gang leaders to allow miners to resurface by smoking them out, as one minister has controversially called it. As part of the operation, officials have cut off food and water supplies at the Stilfontein mine, trapping the illegal miners inside. As per reports, some 4,000 miners were initially stuck underground. Hundreds have resurfaced in weak conditions and faced arrest as soon as they appeared. While South African authorities call the operation important, a chilling letter has put them in a dilemma. On Christmas Eve, one of the illegal miners emerged out with a letter attached to him. The letter, written in the local language, mentioned that more of his fellow miners have died in the deep mine shaft and hunger has caused them to resort to cannibalism. They urged the authorities to send more food, which the government had earlier denied. But this letter has reportedly stunned the officials who took action and supplied food and water to the illegal miners. These illegal miners are locally called zama-zamas, that loosely translates to take a chance. They work in closed mines to extract minerals like gold, iron ore, coal and manganese. Zama-zamas reportedly operate in some 6,000 disused mines. They tend to remain in the mines for long periods, over months sometimes, looking to hit gold and make money. They rely on help from contractors outside who pull them up for a fee. These contractors also supply them with essential supplies. However, most zama-zamas are undocumented migrants from neighboring nations like Zimbabwe, Lesotho and Mozambique. Many are believed to be exploited by criminal gangs. The ongoing standoff between the illegal miners and the South African government has revealed the scale of criminal infiltration in the country's mining industry. South Africa was once the world's top gold producer, but aging infrastructure and policy-making failures have forced many commercial operators to shut. These mines have now become the site of turf wars between violent gangs who are competing to smuggle the precious metal. Around 25 tons of gold from South Africa is believed to be smuggled to countries like the United Arab Emirates and Switzerland every year. Though South Africa has decided to go hard on the illegal miners, it has faced criticism from activists and human rights groups. They say the government has no authority to block people's food and essential supplies. So, while South Africa is using starvation as a weapon against criminals, it has landed itself in a catch-22 situation.
Our final story today is from East Africa. Imagine paying more for school education than for medical bills or healthcare. In Uganda, this has become a harsh reality for a lot of families. School fees have risen to $700 for a 3-month term. Some parents face impossible choices, forcing children to stay home. What's behind Uganda's tuition crisis, and how is it affecting the future of the country? Here's our report.
Every child has a dream, whether it's becoming a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer or an artist. But in the East African country of Uganda, these dreams are starting to feel out of reach. With each new school term, the cost of a better chance at life is rising. Parents are struggling to pay unpredictable and unregulated school fees, and the constant threats from schools demanding dues are becoming harder to ignore.
We are really suffering. The schools are never patient with us. Even if you're left with a balance of 1,000 shillings out of 10,000 shillings, they will send your kid back home. They don't care. They will send the child back home until you clear their 1,000 shillings. All they care about is just their business. There is no help at all.
The issue is not just limited to just Uganda. The goal of education for all appears to be slipping away for many across the sub-Saharan Africa. The region has had the highest dropout rates in the world, and one of the main reasons is financial burden. According to the World Bank, school fees is the biggest financial worry for 54% of adults in sub-Saharan Africa and 40% of the population in Uganda. Apparently, the price of educating a child is even higher than medical bills and other expenses.
There's a time when I reached a moment I went to the hospital thinking maybe it is malaria or what. When they tried to test they are checking my blood pressure. Then they told me my blood pressure is going high. But I had so much worries because all of the children, some of them were still at home.
In Uganda, the burden of tuition fees is such that the government-funded schools charge almost $700 for a 3-month term. And when it comes to more famous, expensive and increasing number of private schools, the government does not try to interfere. The skyrocketing cost of school fee is significant for a nation like Uganda, where the annual GDP per capita was $864 last year. However, more than anything, it's the uncertain and questionable tuition hikes that haunt parents across the country of 45 million people.
Millions are being kept away. Because when you learn that there are schools where they pay school fees 150,000 for a whole term, that is about 2.5 months. And then they tell you these kids have studied, the kids studied for the first 3 weeks, was sent out for school fees and never returned. Now imagine if they are struggling at 150, what about above that?
As per the Uganda Bureau of Statistics, around 60% of kids attend early grades, while the number drastically falls to 22% in secondary school. The East African country has a program to address this issue. The scheme introduced back in 2007 allows secondary education for all students. But while schools usually do not require tuition, parents are responsible for uniforms, textbooks and other costs. Sometimes, the routine school expenses in Uganda range from the purchase of a bus to a large bag of cement, raising ethical questions about what does qualify as tuition fees. Children from working-class families who are counting on the mercy of school officials rely on in-kind payments such as vegetables and fruits.
Some of them whose parents are really struggling, and some few of them selected some of them may come with an idea of providing something in kind. Say like, can I bring cassava? May I bring my potatoes? May I bring my greens, buga, nakati, pineapples? We also have watermelons. They say yes. Of course, it follows a program. You don't bring every, and you're not the only one. So it is timetabled that if you're supplying this week, then it is her supplying the other week. Like that, such that everyone gets a bit.
Now, the Equal Opportunities Commission, a government agency in Uganda, has called for punishment against public schools, which demand high and arbitrary fees. It has warned that raising tuition payments randomly force children to drop out of school and put their future at stake. But until a stricter action is taken, it seems like the children in Uganda will continue to be deprived of their right to education, and the cycle of inequality will go on.
That's it on the show for today. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again on Monday at the same time.